and welcome to our August episode of our Dóchas webinars. My name is Christine and I'm on the Mental Health and Wellbeing Working Group of the Irish Support Agency. So welcome everyone. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting the webinar from the lands of the Bidigal and Gadigal people of the Eora Nations. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of various lands on which all of us you are watching from. We respect to elders past, present and emerging. Dóchas will be brought to you on the first Monday of every month, with each of session exploring a different aspect of health and well-being. All of our previous webinars can be found on the ISA YouTube channel. Tonight, we are exploring nutrition and what it actually means. Our body, as we know, are temples, of course, and we know that we must look after them. But sometimes for different reasons, we can find that difficult to do so. What we do know is what we eat can directly affect our physical, but also our mental health. And it is something that we need to take seriously. Sometimes our relationship with food is rooted in our early understandings about how and what to eat from how we were brought up. So tonight, we'll be looking at the possibility of rewriting our relationship with food and learning to get back to our healthiest selves. We are delighted to be joined by Marie Holland, clinical nutritionist, and Johnny Klusch, Provisional Psychologist and PT. Welcome to the both of you guys. As always, if you have any questions throughout this conversation, please free to pop them into our chat box and we'll get to them. Good evening, guys, and thank you so much for joining us. Maria, Johnny, both very welcome. I'll start off with ladies first. Maria, do you want to let me know a bit about you?
Yeah. My name is Marie. I work as a clinical nutritionist. I was in practice prior to COVID, but now in Clovelly, but now I just do mobile or online consults. When I say clinical nutrition, it's more to do with the imbalances in our body for kind of disease states, like say thyroid issues, gut issues, mental well-being, blood markers out of range. I also work for Blackmores, who own Bioceuticals, a supplement company, and I end up working there helping other practitioners with training and education. Been in Australia more times than I actually have been in Ireland now, showing my age. Lived down in Maroubra, got 3 teenage daughters I get to trial lots of things on. Unfortunately, they don't listen to any of my nutrition advice. But yeah, so that's a bit about me. Gonna go, Johnny?
Well, I have been in Australia for about 3.5 years now. I am of Irish descent, as I'm sure you can tell. But yeah, for me, I suppose my nutrition journey started when I was young. So I was always interested, I suppose, in biology and how the body worked. And that was kind of just in secondary schools. And then that kind of led me into studying biochemistry in NUIG. I was playing a lot of football at the time, so I knew that fueling yourself appropriately for games led to usually better performances. So I just didn't know how at the time. So that kind of led me down the pathway of studying a master's in nutrition. But then I ended up learning a lot more about nutrition. So I ended up learning about food chemistry, marketing, metabolism, psychology of eating, for example. I then got registered as an associate nutritionist and then began working in clinical nutrition for 5 years, where I worked in a pharmaceutical company manufacturing total parenteral nutrition, which is a specialized method of feeding which completely bypasses the digestive tract and is given to clients intravenously. Got sick of that then, and then started to do personal training, where I was helping clients with their health and fitness goals through training and dietary adjustments. And then, took it upon myself to do more studies. So just after completing a master's in psychology there, and now I combine all of these components to try and help people with their mental health as well as their overall well-being. And that is me in a nutshell.
It was a very short, brief introduction by both of you. No, thank you. Both really do think that both of you will bring a lot to this webinar. Can you help me, everyone, understand what is nutrition? What does that word mean? We throw it around daily. What does that word mean? Maria first?
Yep,
maybe?
I'll go first. It is a very broad word, and you'll be surprised to know that nutrition and well-being isn't just about food. It relates to sleep, stress, and there's just so much going on. And as the media kind of portray this type of diet is cool and that type of diet is cool, it is confusing. And I always bring it down to what we eat. Like, you know, it doesn't matter what diet you're on, as long as you're eating real food and that food isn't anything that you're allergic to or have any intolerances to, and just making sure that your plate looks quite balanced. I kind of use a visual thing. So you need to have about 3 fistfuls of vegetables on each meal. I let it slip a little bit with breakfast, about this much protein, which would fit into the palm of your hand. And, you know, and about a finger of fats or good kind of like avocados and aisles. That's probably the simplest way to explain what a good diet should look like without going into all the quirks that we can have depending on whether we've got a diagnosed condition, food intolerances, etc. Interested to see what you say, Johnny, there, just based on that very good introduction.
No, I'm in full agreement. Like, I do think, you know, when it comes to overall health and well-being, you know, it's definitely multifactorial and there's a lot of elements to it. But I suppose when we're talking specifically about nutrition, you know, it would be, in my understanding, be based around the biochemical and the physiological processes that an organism has to do in order to survive and maybe maintain structural integrity. So I suppose a better or a more easier way to kind of think about it would be using food to fuel your body and also to stay healthy while carrying out its day-to-day functioning, essentially. So, but once again, that's only one part of the puzzle in terms of overall health and well-being.
Perfect. I suppose another question we have is, you know, like nutrition, like as you said, Marie, it can differ for different people. And we always see, like, this is like when you go into a shop, this is what a man should have, this is what a woman should have. What is the difference of what's a daily intake for men versus females?
Yeah. You can go into the whole counting of, am I getting the RDIs, which is your recommended daily intake of different nutrients, but it gets a bit scientific and a bit hard to manage. And that's why I like if you have like a fistful, because a man's fist and a woman's fist are different sizes. So if you have your fistful, your fist size of vegetables by 3 on a plate, and the more varied colors, the more of those phytochemicals and nutrients you're getting, and the palm of a good quality protein. And that's where it comes down to, really, that you want to eat good stuff. You know, anything in a package obviously isn't ideal. You know, we do it. We all have packaged food in some way, but just to reduce the ones with all the different additives, etc. If you're eating a lot of vegetables and good quality protein, in theory, you should be getting most of the nutrients. And, you know, you can do testing as well, like bloods, to see if you're low in certain key nutrients. And then depending on what else is going on, you may need to supplement. But ideally, you should get everything from diet first off, especially when you're younger. As you age, unfortunately, we do need to rely on supplementation a bit more.
Yeah. Johnny, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I know for, you know, just through my own studies and that, like, that each country has their own nutritional recommendations for both males and females, and it's usually found on government websites. So as Marie had mentioned there, you know, RDIs, you know, are quite common in Ireland and the UK. Over here, they're nutrient reference values, so they're a little bit different. But the recommendations are not only usually based around biological sex, but also from age, for example. So Marie touched on it there, like, you know, for a prime example would be, you know, a 6-year-old boy would have a very different nutritional requirements to a 36-year-old man. So it's not always based around sex. So there's variables within that as well. Another, I suppose, component would be if it's contextualized too. So you could have 2 people of the same gender, so 2 men, age 30, for example. One is sedentary and is an office worker. His dietary needs and requirements would be a lot different to someone, you know, who's the same age, 30-year-old tennis player or football player. So it can be quite contextualized as well. But Like Marie said, there is usually general guidelines for maintaining, I suppose, a good healthy diet or balanced diet. So that usually includes, a lean source of protein, maybe some complex carbohydrates such as rice, whole grains, your cereals, fruits and vegetables. Marie touched on it already. Multicolored, more varied, the better, and then a small amount of fats as well. So that would be kind of my take on it.
Thanks, guys. I think he's kind of touched on it a bit, but why do you think people find it difficult to adhere to nutritional guidelines? Is it lack of knowledge or education? Because I remember when I was in school, it was 5 a day, and I think that was it. There was nothing more said.
Yeah.
And my mom and dad, Irish family, is eat what's on the plate. And I'm just so is it how we're brought up? Is it knowledge, education? How come a lot of us just can't get it?
It's conflicting out there, I'll give you that. Low fat was cool, now good full fats is the thing. And it is, it's like a maze out there trying to work out what's good, what's not. And then ketogenic diets are kind of all the fad, but they're not suitable for everybody. And then you've got intermittent fasting, you've got restrictive eating. And that's why I think it's important, if you're really struggling with nutrition, to work with somebody one-on-one, just even for 1 or 2 sessions, to get all your blood work, get all your testing done, and then come and say, okay, this is what I like to cook, this is what I like to eat, here's my bloods, here's my health conditions that I'd like to get to, or here's what I'm experiencing, and where's the bridge? We all know when we're out of sync. I'm very sensitive to caffeine, so I can't have coffee after 10 o'clock or I'll just impacts my sleep. But my husband can have a coffee after dinner. So that's why it's so hard. There's no one solution that fits all. And I think we do, we all look at what's on the media, be it social media or, advertising or marketing. And I think if we listen to our bodies, we'll know what's right after time. It's a lot of trial and error. Even when I have clients, where I worked at Bulb in Clovelly, was a lot of French ladies used to come in. They'd moved to Australia, and within 6 months they had gut issues. And it was just the gluten here in Australia, because it's actually sprayed before and after if it's not organic, the crops. Whereas in France, they could eat all the gluten they like. So that's what makes it even more confusing. So I don't want to try not answer your question, but what I guess to summarize is, listen to your body, take your time eating, eat real food, and just maybe even record or keep a food diary if you have, say, digestive issues, or if something's out of kilter, and just play around with it. And if in doubt, and if lots of serious conditions, definitely work with somebody who's experienced in that area. What do you think, Johnny?
I would agree with that as well. There's a lot of individual, variability amongst people's diets and tolerances to certain foods. And as you say, to add to the complexity, then, you have gluten over here is different to gluten in different countries. So working with someone is very important, I think, in that regard. But I think a lot of people, they understand the nutritional guidelines. They know what they need to do, to be healthy. The Mediterranean diet has been, it's been around for years. People know exactly what it is, but a lot of it is, I suppose, can be down to marketing as well. So I wouldn't say it's just about lack of education, because people do understand what it is, but marketing, for example, can be, from the psychological perspective, there's a lot of time and effort put into, making foods look so appealing that you have a tendency to go for them, as opposed to something, let's just say, a chocolate bar with a color wrapper on it is a lot more appealing and eye-catching to the eye in comparison to the head of a broccoli, It's one example, but convenience as well. It's a lot easier to pick up, the likes of fast food or, anything from a shop, essentially. You grab and go kind of situation, as opposed to taking your time, thinking about what you're going to be having throughout the week, you know, selecting those ingredients and then having to cook it up. So convenience is probably another one. I would say hyperpalatability as well. So foods that are highly processed and, you know, highly formulated tend to be extremely tasty, and, you know, people find it difficult to, I suppose, stop eating them. And more than likely, people will have a tendency to go for them as opposed to something that might be less bland, or more bland, should I say. So, you know, your chicken, rice, and broccoli, there's a prime bland, you know, healthy meal, but, you know, has no flavor whatsoever. I am guilty of that. And yeah, potentially accessibility as well. You know, people mightn't have access to the most healthiest of foods either. Like, so yeah, there's a lot of components to it. Like, people do understand what the guidelines are, but I think there's many factors that come into play as to why they can't actually stick to it. So
perfect, thank you. I suppose we've chatted a good bit about like what to eat, but quite often with people having a busy lifestyle and whatnot, people skip food. What happens when we don't feed our bodies?
Do you want to go first, Johnny, or change?
Oh, yeah, we're mixing it
Go
over.
on, you go first.
Okay. Yeah, look, I think the term that's usually gone for someone who doesn't feed the body what it requires is called malnutrition, and it can vary both ways. So it can be, you know, undernourishing, all the way to the opposite extreme, which is overnourishing. So obesity and overweight, and they can have serious complications on, you know, people's health in many domains. Like, so they usually, I think when people are malnourished on either end of the spectrum, you know, it can have serious complications on poor health, immunity, low libido. There can be cardiovascular complications, cognitive impairments. There's any amount of things that can happen when you don't fuel your body appropriately. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah. And I think I'll add to that. Obviously, I'm a bit older than most of you here. I'm early 50s, that a lot of my friends who have gone through the last, say, 20 or 30 years, kind of either being stressed at work or just not putting nutrition first in mind, they're all on medication. They're either on a statin for blood cholesterol, they're either on an antidepressant because their blood sugar is out of kilter. And if I look as well, I'm at that age where the parents are getting really sick, and you look at your parents, I mean, obviously you've got a good few years to go yet, and hopefully, touch wood, it'll be good, but there's a lot of dementia out there, which is also known as diabetes type 3 in the nutrition world. So if we're not eating right, and when I say eating right, you know, it's okay to have a few cheat days, etc. Just making sure that our meals are balanced, like I said, 80% of the time. And I think Johnny just tipped on it as well there. Make sure you plan. People plan their social life, they plan their work, but you need to sit down every 3 days and say, okay, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to eat my dinner here, and not, you know, too scientifically, but just give it a bit of thought and make sure you have leftovers next day. And I think there's a question there for somebody who's on a budget. My kids have for lunch every day leftovers from dinner, and it's just putting a bit extra into the pot. It saves the thinking. It's also, you know, the more veggies you put in, maybe veggies is not a good example now with prices, but you know, we do need to take care. If we don't take care now, we'll pay for it in 20 years time.
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree with you there. Both myself and my partner always plan our weekly shop. Love doing it. 2 hours yesterday, but I know, like, I have breakfasts, lunches and dinners in the fridge for the week, and it kind of leads me on to another question. Is kind of, there's obviously a difference of like missing food for a bit or like ongoing, and I suppose a modern term now is this hangry, like, and like people are like, is there like kind of, is hangry a biological thing? Is it real? Are people grumpy because they haven't fueled their body?
It probably comes down to blood glucose dropping, that brings in the anger of it all. So And the reason it drops is because the previous meal mightn't be balanced with enough kind of protein and fats to kind of keep the blood sugars high. So, you know, when you kind of have that really bad chocolate, you feel great. And then an hour later, you want something else. And if you don't feed it, then your blood glucose is going to drop more. And hence you're going to get that kind of hunger feeling. So if you do get that, then obviously having some kind of good fats or kind of a small, even a boiled egg as a snack, something like that will keep you balanced till a bit further. But if you do, like we snack too much in the Western society, I'm as bad as the next person to me. But for those that do want to kind of eat healthy, balancing your meals and cutting out snacks or reducing them is definitely a good place to start. And keep it so simple, like just try and change one thing a week. Like it's great to hear that you do your menu planning every week. And even just taking into maybe planning what you're going to eat for the next 2 days for some people would be a good step to start with.
Yeah.
I'd add to that as well. Like I know that there's certain differences with people in terms of how they react to food, to, I suppose, being on an empty stomach or, being hungry. I know for me, just anecdotally myself, like I have a tendency to go quiet. I don't really get hangry as such, which is what my better half does. But I've learned in time to stay, keep a 5 meter proximity radius away from her, until I give her a snack. So, but yeah, I do think there is merit to it. Like, you can be guaranteed you're going to get hungry multiple times throughout the day. So I think that, planning some sort of meals in advance to some degree, or even where you're going to go or when you're going to eat, is quite important. Like, and I think it brings a bit more intention to the actual eating process as well. Like you know what you're going to have. You're able to maintain a little bit better balance. You're not just waiting for yourself to get hungry and then it's, everything looks so delicious at that stage. Like, so you have a bit more control, I think, over your dietary habits at that stage. So.
Perfect. I suppose kind of we've chatted about, like, obviously with lack of food and then when you're eating the right foods, but like what exactly in our food or in our nutrition leads to good mental health? Is it like certain vitamins or vitamins here in Australia or what is the science?
Look, there's a lot of books out there about mental health. There's actually, I don't think there's one good evidence-based study saying that that low mood is related to low serotonin, as we all think. There's a lot of good marketing going on in medical companies in saying that. I have friends on SSRIs that actually are doing well on it. But first off, we need to look at simple things like blood sugar balance, our thyroid function, and the lack of B12. Those three are kind of top up there on mood. So B12, if you're vegetarian or vegan, unfortunately, you're going to have to supplement. Blood sugar, we've touched briefly on it, but if you can balance out your meals, make sure you're checking if there's a history of diabetes in the family, because it is genetic. And thyroid it's a bit trickier because you go to the doctor, they'll only test part of the thyroid panel, they won't do the complete one. So you probably could do it yourself at $100 out of Medicare, because the doctors get audited on what tests they order. So they won't do it for you unless you have a very good doctor, but naturopaths and nutritionists can. So if you've got any of those out of kilter, it's going to make it hard for you to kind of address low mood without having a really good diet. So they're kind of first place to look. And then based on that, obviously, there's good supplement Bs and a good magnesium. Now, magnesium is like chocolate as well. You can get really bad chocolate out there and you can get good magnesium. So magnesium for me in a supplement would be one that's chelated with an amino acid. So it just bound so that you actually get it when you intake it in. Because I think a lot of our enzymes and a lot of our processes in our body need magnesium as a cofactor. The soils in Australia are quite depleted in magnesium, and hence the reason most people I see are very low in that. So they're kind of magnesium and Bs would be my go-to initially, and just looking at people's diet. And if you're not getting any, if you don't notice anything after a month, then you're either on the wrong ones or it's not right for you. but with those two, you should see a change. And I think I've said it before as well, just checking bloods as well. So it gives you a starting point.
Yeah, just to add to that, I suppose, you know, I 100% agree. I'd also say that, you know, mental health in general is, you know, multifaceted. You know, it's not just solely reliant on nutrition, but if we are speaking about the nutrition component of the effects on mental health, like, you know, there's a new kind of study coming out, or a discipline, should I say. It's called nutritional neuroscience. And, you know, it's starting to show that there are a lot of nutritional factors intertwined with human cognition, behavior, and emotions as well. It's been shown that a good diet, mainly, I think the most studied one is usually the Mediterranean diet, you know, has been shown to have better outcomes with mental health, you know, in terms of lower stress, lower depression, lower anxiety, for example, in comparison to those diets that might be, you know, high in trans fats, for example, or highly processed foods. They usually have a tendency to have higher risks of depression and anxiety from a psychological perspective. But another thing, you know, some common, I would say, nutrients that are deficient from people with mental health disorders are usually omega-3s, magnesium, as you'd mentioned, yes, B vitamins, massive one as well. But certain amino acids like tryptophan and tyrosine, those are precursors for certain neurotransmitters in the brain, such as serotonin and dopamine. So, you know, I'd say basically, if you can stick to, once again, the Mediterranean diet, here I go again, it just seems to come around, like it seems to tick all the boxes, but it has a tendency to just affect your overall health in terms of your gut health and your brain health. So sticking to something like that would probably be more beneficial than, you know, something highly processed.
Thanks. A lot there from both. Thank you. I suppose quite often, like, we're told that, like, I don't know, certain things that, like, oh, like, you know, caffeine is good when you're tired, or like that midday slump when you're just like, oh, I need a sugar rush and things like that. Is it difficult to break lifelong habits? Can we relearn certain habits? Yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Of course you can. It just comes at a cost, you know, like I'm not going to give up my caffeine in the morning because I like it too much. But if I knew it was impacting, say, my sleep, I would give it up after a while, because sleep is more important to me. So the afternoon slump is back to your blood sugar levels again. If you look back at your lunch, if you know, you're not going to be able to change that habit unless, one, there's a cost to you, but also if it's not as easy. So it's easier to change that if you have a good lunch where it is balanced with proteins, good fats, and a lot of vegetables. And then instead of having a sugary snack, say at 3 o'clock, come in with even a boiled egg or some carrots and hummus, something else as an alternative to, you know, to kind of build on that. And I'm guessing, Johnny, you'll have a lot with all the education on different habit breaking things. But yeah, you're fighting against yourself if you don't get the cost and if you don't have the replacement. What do you reckon, Johnny?
Yeah, look, behavior change in general is quite complicated, because it kind of means giving up one certain habit and trying to replace it with something, you know, that is probably novel and awkward at the start, like, you know, so a new set of actions. So I know from a psychological perspective, or I suppose a neurochemical perspective, should I say, more like it, when you start to form a habit, the region in your brain fires at the beginning of that new behavior, and then while you're doing the behavior, it kind of goes down, and then towards the end of the behavior, it goes back up again. And that over time creates patterns in both your behavior and your brain chemistry as well, which makes it very difficult to break a habit. So you start to develop, you get a bit of a high from, you know, the dopamine and the serotonin that are releasing those neurotransmitters, and then it goes down and then it goes up, but you keep repeating that, you know, it starts to feel good. So it's difficult to break habits, but it's not necessarily impossible. It does require a bit of a cognitive effort though at the start, until the new habit that you're trying to implement or eradicate, I suppose, becomes a bit more automatistic. Sorry, should I say? Automatistic, yeah.
Perfect. Another question, I suppose, I know I keep throwing caffeine about, but like, I suppose you get addicted to broccoli. But yeah, can we get addicted to certain foods? Like, I know so many people say, oh, I'm addicted to this, and if I don't have it, I get withdrawal symptoms. Is that true, or are they just really liking broccoli or coffee?
Well, caffeine is addictive, as we all know. But also you find some people who just love bread, say, and that's probably because the gut bacteria has a certain kind of out of balance. So when you find that you're craving, say, carbs or something like that, there's definitely a dysbiosis somewhere, and generally is in the gut. And you're probably hearing a lot about that, where it's like, I think quite a high percentage of our serotonin is made in our gut. And if our gut's not happy, that's kind of related to our mood as well. And it's not as simple as just taking a probiotic. There's a lot going on there. And the main thing is when we eat something, even the actual value of that food starts once we start chewing it. The chewing process creates that saliva that breaks down different things, and then it goes down to our gut and into your stomach and into your small intestines. And from there, the nutrients are absorbed into your blood and into your body. So if that mechanic isn't working to its best, you're not going to get the nutrients from your food. If you don't get the nutrients from your food, you could be tired. And that's why you kind of crave the chocolate, because you haven't, you're just not, your food's not satisfying your requirements. And if you're deficient in things like magnesium, that's one of the ones that because you're craving chocolate the whole time. Caffeine is maybe because you're tired, and you're tired because you're not sleeping, so it's all interconnected. Now I've lost my train. I don't even know what the question was. But I'll pass that on to you, Johnny, see if you can remember.
Oh, thanks, Marie.
I know it was broccoli somewhere. Yeah. I do like broccoli, actually. It's very good for detoxing.
It is. It's great now. I suppose touching on your point at the start, caffeine itself is a drug. It's a psychoactive drug. So there is an addictive element to it. But I know that food addiction is a very controversial topic, because it's never usually one ingredient that makes it addictive. Whereas, conventional addictions usually can be pinpointed to one certain ingredient, like drugs, for example. Caffeine is one there, or alcohol. So I know that most of the evidence usually points towards foods that are hyperpalatable, so that, have a lot of high sugars in them, high fats, potentially a little bit of salt in there as well. And that combination, specific formulated combination, makes it quite irresistible. So these foods usually tend to trigger like the feel good reward centers in our brain, which tend to release dopamine. When people experience that pleasure associated with that, they have a tendency to keep going for more and more. And in turn actually creates this perpetual cycle, which creates the habit then of making the food addicted. But as I say, it's still ongoing. For us to call food addiction a construct now at the minute, I think is still in its very early days. So it's going to take a bit more time and research until it actually becomes recognized as an actual construct itself.
Thanks. It's a lot. But no, thank you. I suppose for those that are listening and that like sometimes feel you've gone too far down a path and that there's no point like making any changes, putting the head in the sand, is there any advice you'd give? Is there any like one sentence, or what would you give to someone that just feels they're stuck?
Chew your food, regardless of what you're eating. Sit down and eat your food. None of this TV, and use the time with food to connect with your family, or friends, or whoever you're with. Make it a fun activity, and just change one thing a week. Don't try and be healthy tomorrow, because you're going to fail. Just pick, even if it's just planning what you're going to eat for 2 days, or if it's just say I'm going to drink 2 liters of water tomorrow, or I'm just going to have all my caffeine before midday, things like that. Keep it simple, have fun.
Yeah, I'd say it's something very similar in terms of, the path hasn't ended. I think that, there's always some benefit that you can, get from making healthy changes to your lifestyle, whether that be in nutrition or any sort of, facet of your life. But I suppose if you're trying to pick something that you want to achieve, it's trying to see what the outcome is. So, let's just say weight loss, for example, that's the outcome. I think it's just, once again, back to planning to some degree as well, right? Okay, what are the strategies that I need to put in place here? What am I going to do with nutrition? Am I going to mix it up in terms of health? Am I going to limit my portion sizes? Have a bit of plan in place, I think, and make it very, very manageable for yourself at the start. And if you do that for long enough, then, you should be able to achieve any outcome really that you want.
Thank you. For those that feel that they have no skills in cooking, or maybe finances aren't there to eat, and as we discussed earlier on, thank God I'm not addicted to broccoli, because the price of that these days through the roof. But yeah, I suppose for someone that doesn't have all the skills, or doesn't really feel confident cooking a big batch, or may not have the finances, what advice have you for that?
There's 2 things there. One is finance and the other one is confidence. There's so much out there. HelloFresh, it's not cheap. That's why I've split your question into 2. Is so convenient. We used it in the lockdown because we were just trying to limit our time out of the house. Meals are very tasty and so easy to prepare. It became quite expensive because we're a family of 5. So now we just go onto their website and just pick the recipes we like, and we can kind of guess, because sometimes it says a packet of whatever, but you can work out that it's 20 grams or 50 grams, depending on what you're cooking. So I like recipe 10 eats. I think that's how you say it. Recipe. I'll have a look at it and I'll put it in the chat in a minute. Amazing. She does amazing videos, explains how to cook everything. And, so we're quite fortunate. Like Jamie Oliver is amazing. Taste.com.au are great websites. You can have a slow cooker, just braise some meat and trick some veggies in the morning. And then when you come home, or if you're working from home, it's ready in the evening. You don't have to think about it. So I feel like I grew up in Ireland a zillion years ago. My mum, rice was rice pudding. We didn't even have rice with our main meal. I didn't even know it existed till I came to Australia. So we've come a long way with, there's so much online to learn how to cook, and you can keep it as simple as you want. Just batch. I do a roast of tray of veggies at least once a week, and that feeds the next few days, and just add protein to it. But down to cost as well. Batch cooking, going for the lower cuts of meat like the chuck steak in the slow cooker is quite cheap, and the more you break it down, the better for absorption and for digestion. Yes, broccoli is expensive. Frozen veggies aren't as bad as people think they are. Grow your own, actually. We've got cabbage, lettuce growing in the garden now. It's beautiful. Keep it. There's lots of ways, but it isn't. I think it's cheaper to cook at home than eat out. Definitely, even with the price of vegetables they are at the moment. Take away chicken from the chicken shop, which is great here, and just throw a salad together with some, steamed greens with it would be nice as well. But I'll look up that recipe on how my latest one is. Does it know what it's 10 eats? I think it's called.
I don't know.
She does Instagram as well.
I'll get you to look at that. Johnny, any tips?
Yeah, look, I think Marie's kind of touched on all of them there, really. You've left none for me now, Marie.
Sorry.
But yeah, look, there's a host of meal delivery services out there, ranging from ones like HelloFresh, for example, that they do require you to cook to a certain degree. I mean, they deliver the raw ingredients, so there is a bit of effort to cook them, but the meals are delicious. Then you've got your ready meal delivery services that are already cooked and prepared and just delivered to you. like My Muscle Chef, for example, or macros or YouFoods. I'd say as well, if people don't have the confidence to cook, like there are a number of, you know, well, we've got Google, we've got, you know, YouTube at our disposal all the time. Like, you know, there's so many tutorials and so much, you know, out there that, you know, that it isn't an excuse to actually, you know, not know how to cook now at this stage. Like, you know, if you want to look for something, you can find it. You can be sure of that. Like, so I'd say just have a look and, you know, make some simple recipes that you can start, and, you know, don't be thinking that you're going to be Jamie Oliver straight away, like, you know, but start small, start simple, you know, some lean meats, some vegetables, put it together, get a recipe, you know. It's very easy. Even if you go into the likes of Kmart or Big W and that, you know, there's always going to be a section that just has, you know, cookbooks and stuff like that. So there's loads of options from that perspective in terms of confidence cooking. And don't be afraid to give it a go. You know, I think Marie mentioned this earlier, you know, in terms of having fun as well. Like, you know, if you have kids or, you know, your partner, you know, you could always try to experiment and have a bit of a game out of it. You know, don't expect it to be great the first time round, but, you know, just like anything, it takes practice. And I think if you stick with it long enough, you know, you might be able to develop a healthy meal or recipe in, you know, half the time that you probably started off with. But and then, yeah, and one last thing would be batch cooking. I think Christine has mentioned that already. You know, I do the exact same. I batch cook for about 3 days, stored in the fridge, and then, you know, I batch cook for another 3 days after that, just so it doesn't go all gammy. But yeah, it's so convenient, like, and I think it's just, you actually save more time and you're able to, I'd say, have a bit more control and autonomy over your diet as well.
Yeah. Marie, did you find the?
Sorry.
Did you find the?
Yeah,
name?
I put it on the chat. Recipe tin eats.com. She's good. She's got Instagram as well. Like, I just did her. I put some chuck steak in a slow cooker at the weekend with lots of spice, and then we just did pulled tacos on Saturday night, and we just added different things. So it was really nice the next day, actually. It was even better the second day.
Some of them definitely are.
But yeah, no, it's lots of nice. And then she even explains, like, that's what I like about the recipes at the bottom, but there's like 2 or 3 pages explaining how to change or what version. Like, we did the pad thai noodles one night, and she explained, I prefer this type of noodles in Australia, and if you wanted to caramelize like the restaurant do, blah blah blah. So, you know, there's kind of, if you're a good cook, you could read it and learn a lot, and if you're just average, you can just go to the recipe and try it. I'm in the middle somewhere.
No, there's definitely a lot out there. Yeah, be it on Instagram, TikTok, yep, in Kmart, Big W.
I hate TikTok. My daughter keeps making things from TikTok, and there's no recipe, and everything is a disaster, and she wonders why it doesn't work out. And I'm there.
Yeah, no, my partner that is what he likes doing now. Is finding recipes, and look, we've had some great ones, and we've had some ones that aren't on the menu again. Another thing I actually just thought of there was just on keeping budgets down, and that is, like, being in Australia, it's one thing I learned myself was buying fruit and veg that's in season, because that was one thing I learned. I was just like, why can't I, like, why is this like such a price in January, but it's not that price like later on in the month? But it's just, getting to know what's in season was one of the good things that I suppose I learned. We had a question that came in there into the chat, was what would be best to eat the night before and on the day of if you have a match? So sport.
I'll leave that one to you, Johnny.
Oh, performance nutrition. Yes. So yeah, if it's performance based, you predominantly want to be thinking about carbohydrates. This is where sometimes the health component doesn't come into consideration as much as the performance context, if that makes sense. So you might do something more for your performance that mightn't be as healthy for you. So what I mean by that is you might have a tendency to go for, let's just say, more simpler forms of carbohydrates that are easily digestible. So stuff that's very, very sugary. That's going to give you a lot more sustained energy, or sorry, not sustained energy, but energy during the game, as opposed to if you're to eat, you know, the likes of your brown rice and stuff like that. But there's an element of trying to get both of them in at the same time. So what I would normally do before a game would be to carb load the day before as much as you possibly could. So anywhere between, actually don't know, maybe for a male, 85, I'm 85 kilos. So I'd be talking anywhere between 300-400 grams of carbs, maybe a bit more, depending on how much you're going to be doing, which is not necessarily healthy, but for performance outcomes, it can be. But then when it's the day of the match, you're still thinking carbohydrates, but I like to think of it as a continuum. So the further you are away from a game, you want to be thinking of trying to get your more solid carb sources in. So the likes of your pastas, your breads, and maybe a bowl of cereal. The closer you get to a game, you want to try and make it a bit more, how would you say, liquid based, so that it's easily circulating around the body and that you can use it for performance. And it doesn't give you any digestion of the stress while you're running. And caffeine as well is a great ergonomic aid. So it can also help delay the onset of fatigue. So being strategic with your caffeine an hour before a game can be quite beneficial too.
Thank you. I suppose any final thoughts or questions from anyone in the audience? Because I think we've covered a lot.
Marie, I was really keen to know about, you'd said something around dementia and in the nutrition world, that being the third diabetes. Am I correct? Yeah. I previously worked for 2 organizations, and my clients all had dementia, either younger onset or later onset. So yeah, I know the Mediterranean diet again is preached about a lot in terms of reducing the risk. Can you just explain a little bit about it being the third diabetes?
Yeah, so like diabetes is all inflammation in the body, and inflammation in the body goes inflammation in the brain. I'm just doing very high level and simple conversation here. So the more you're inflamed in the brain, then the more of the kind of related to Alzheimer's / dementia issues. There's a really good book out there by Dale Brenson. I think it's called End of Dementia or End of Alzheimer's. He's actually spoken at one of the conferences that the company Pharmaceuticals has held over the years. And the gist being that there's a few different types of, say, it's more Alzheimer's in his case, which is similar enough to dementia. And just by bringing down the inflammation and all those kind of inflammatory foods, which would be your excess gluten, excess dairy, things like that, and obviously sugar, you can change the way the body kind of thinks, etc. So if that's something of interest, that book's well worth reading. It is a bit technical, but I think the average consumer can kind of get the gist of it. It's not too full on and technical. The problem with all these guys, they're amazing, but all the studies in America, you can only change one variable in order to prove that you've solved dementia or Alzheimer's. And as we know, it's a combined, it's so many nutrients missing in the body. I think Johnny mentioned earlier, like fish oils would be one, magnesium, B, zinc, and anything, you know, that inflames the body mostly comes from diet, but also from the environment, stress, and just bringing all that burden down on our body and bringing in a good mindset and, you know, family well-being, you know, it's the whole picture. It's not just one thing. Sleep is so important as well. So, yeah, that's a very quick answer to a very complex.
Thank you for that, because it's even something, you know, you don't want to say to people. Sometimes see these things in the media, and I remember my previous job, the helpline used to blow up. Oh, this vitamin, or there's a cure in America, and you have to manage people's expectations. But if it's a way of reducing the risk, it's worth a go. Or if you've had a diagnosis, you know, you can still slow down the progression potentially. So
he has reversed it in cases. He's presented those cases, but it won't be accepted in American medical world because it's not reproducible, because we're all very different. So what we've been talking about tonight. But in saying that, there's 3 different types of Alzheimer's, and he's gone into different case studies with all of that. So it gives people hope. It's a lot of hard work though. So it'll be less caffeine and more broccoli, isn't it, Christine?
Hi, sorry, can I come in just a wee second? So I'm from a pharma background as well, and I'm just wondering, seriously, because Katrina's coming from a dementia background, is this something that we should be saying to people? Look, if you haven't got coverage across your magnesium, across your vitamin B, and across your good fats, that we should be supplementing. Like if I recognize I don't have a perfect diet in order to prevent dementia in future years, is there enough evidence base there to turn around and say, go on, let's get coverage?
I think there is. In saying that, please be mindful before you take any supplements. If you're on any medications, there could be contraindicators, and so you have to be careful. And I feel dementia as well, there's a lot of genetic testing. There's an ApoE3 and a few different things like that can tell you if you're susceptible to it.
Yeah.
But in saying that, supplements some fish oils are generally good because it's fish in a capsule or in a liquid. Magnesium is okay. Some of the Bs are good, but they're all synthesized as well, So, and they're not all equal. You get better quality, etc. But the main thing is looking at the diet and going in with real food where possible. There's no, like, we're all going to get something. I'm getting wrinkles and gray hair, Hopefully I don't get dementia yet, but, so it is the aging process. We can reverse it and we can be a better version for ourselves, but it's not as simple as just taking supplements.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, dementia is the umbrella term and Alzheimer's is the most common form. So for others out there, like the vascular dementias, good heart health, like, and that's where, the nutrition side comes in, your exercise. So look, thank you. That's really interesting and worth looking into.
I'll get his name for you. I'll put it in the chat, the guy who wrote the book.
I think just another point to add to that is that, Marie has touched on it already, but, you really should be setting a good foundation with your diet, first of all, before you, potentially consider supplementing, should I say. And then it's also, on a case-by-case basis too, like, people may be on medication, as Marie's already mentioned, there can be contraindications to that. And as well as that, some people have, the genetic predisposition to getting, a mental health disorder or cognitive impairments or anything like that. So it's very hard to just put it down to, supplements themselves. And as Marie touched on there, it's very hard to prove, certain supplements sometimes, or something might get approved because it's not based on one particular component or mineral, for example. I think it's called the single nutrient hypothesis, actually. Nutrition is so complex because, as I say, we all digest food very differently. Food interacts in the body, very differently with other food. It's not as straightforward, I think, as people would like to think it is. But yeah, also dementia, Alzheimer's, they're multifaceted as well. Like it's not just down to nutrition as well.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we are nearing the end of the night, unless there's any last questions, but I think we have covered all. Thank you, Johnny, so much. Thank you, Marie. Thank you both so much. I think you've shared so much more than I even thought we'd be able to cover today. But yeah, thank you so much. I've literally just got one last question. If if you're identified at risk from a genetic perspective, how can you give yourself the best chance of bolstering reverses?
Reserves.
Well, yeah. I mean, I work with bioceuticals, do a bit of DNA testing, but we just do the nutrient testing. We use My DNA as the company. And if we just test for, like, say, if you've got issues with vitamin D, detoxing female hormones, and phase 2 of the detox. So based on all those different SNPs and those different genes, we will recommend different supplements to people. So I know for me, I'm potentially for estrogen dominant, but if I have my phase 2 of my detox supported with a good diet, and that comes in with your broccoli, all those different types of in there, will help you clear it out as quickly as possible. And then obviously looking at your environment, reducing use of plastics, don't use plastics in the microwave. There's lots of little things, but it's not as simple as you're going to Google it. You're going to have to work with a practitioner in order to find out where your weaknesses are.
Yeah, I was just about to add to that, exactly what you just finished off with there is, you know, if you do have a genetic predisposition to anything like this, you know, as I say, it's going to be multifactorial, but working with, you know, the likes of your clinical nutritionists like Marie, or dietitians, or even any other allied health professionals that are able to assist you with that, you know, is going to give you the best chance, I suppose, in terms of being able to manage whatever might be coming your way, I suppose.
Thank you. We've got a thumbs up for that answer. But yeah, no, I think thank you again for both your contributions. And I think, yeah, you both have very much clearly said it, that like anything that anyone should do, always double check it with it be your doctor, nutritionist, or who it be. I think he's both come back on that. Yeah, should always just seek medical professional advice for this. But I want to say thank you again to both of you, and thank you for everyone for joining us. As always, these sessions are recorded and can be found on the Irish Support Agency website. And I wish you all a good night. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.